Hello, Abraham. And I recently returned from a trip traveling with my backpack, different countries around the world. And as I'm listening to you this morning, my energy here feels dramatically uncomfortable compared to my energy of travel. And when I travel from listening, feeling, lightness, ease, and flow. And back here, I'm doing something differently that's feeling uncomfortable.
Give us more.
The feeling of lightness, I find
when you say here, where do you mean here?
United States. TV, politics, advertisement, conversation, intellect, concepts. And when I was traveling...
Let's not just assign it to those specific things, although they certainly are a part of it. But we talked earlier about the factors that are present in one of those uplifting daydreams, and it's the absence of responsibility, the absence of trying to make anything happen. You are freer out there because you've pre-paved, you've segment intended, you've set that time aside, and so it's not the fact of being out there back here, it's the permission that you've given yourself to be free of the entanglements of whatever.
And I'm finding here, intellectually, leaning toward blaming the conditions for how I'm feeling. And I know that's never true.
But it's not uncommon to do it because conditions are often the basis of contrast. So they are of value. But a condition that controls the way you feel, then the momentum of it has gone too far, which means just too much emphasis on something that you cannot do anything about. But you have complete control over the relationship between your desires and your moment of focus. You have complete control over moving toward what you're wanting. And so if you could be back here, as you say, and focus on those kinds of things, Esther does it too, briefly and momentarily, and let it launch some rockets, and you could find a way to look in the direction of the desire that keeps hatching, then what's going on here could be the basis of many interesting, blissful, connected, leading-edge thoughts.
So as you're doing that demonstration with your hands, when I'm traveling, it feels like the desires are more prevalent and more clear, and back here, they're not. I just haven't done that.
And why? Because there are not so many conditions that I'm focused upon that I bring into my mix that cause the resistance.
Right.
That leads to a determination that I want to be better at not letting it go so far, paying attention to the momentum. Because you're right, you've pointed something out, and we're going to emphasize it too. It doesn't need to be this way, but it usually is. The conditions of travel make it easier to be in alignment than the conditions of being at home. So there is a conditional response to life, which sometimes serves you and sometimes doesn't, but it feels like a cork on a raging sea where you don't have much control. Where if you get out ahead of it, in other words, think about when you make a decision to travel. You pick a place that you'd like to be. You usually pick it at a time of year that is most conducive. In other words, you're pre-paving. You're imagining it in the most satisfying way that you can imagine it. Could you do that when you are at home? Could you get out ahead of it? So when we say get out ahead of it, now let's chew on this a little bit, because this is really where the power of life is. This is really where the power of creation is. Non-physical has less resistance than physical. Thought has less resistance than something that you're focused upon. Manifestation, which you can see and hear and smell and taste and touch, those manifestations are full of the vibration that allowed them to come about. So isn't it logical that if something is manifested and you are gazing toward it, that there's quite a bit of bang for your buck in that, so to speak. But there's one distinction really worth making. Non-physical, in its non-resistant nature, is so much more powerful. But until you've really focused in a non-physical way and felt the power of it, in other words, Esther stands here translating for us and gives the appearance, an accurate appearance, of someone who really knows what she is talking about. But to almost anyone who is watching this, they might leave with an explanation. Well, she's just sure of what she's speaking about. She has strong convictions, and it's just another opinion, which I can take or leave, which is certainly true, which I can benefit from or not, which is certainly true. But if you feel some resonance with some of what you hear here, and you catch a glimpse of this being under the influence of the energy that creates worlds, and you, for a moment, don't do that thing that keeps you from that influence, so you find it. Maybe you meditate on a regular basis and find that quiet space, and then some things start flowing into your mind, as we talked about earlier. And it's an idea, or even more, an impulse, that when you follow it, like the travel, it really has a big payoff for you. And you make that association between receiving that thought and following through on it. Then this is more than just an opinion. Then this is something that you yourself have lived, and you yourself have lived it on many, many, many occasions. You know the difference between a thought that is really powerful and one that is not. So since you brought it up, let's talk about politics just briefly, and the competing sides, so to speak, and how almost without exception the individuals involved have rendered themselves powerless because they're pushing so hard against the other. And so whatever looks like it's winning is just the meanest of the mean. In other words, it's just the one who's most disconnected and most comfortable in that being disconnected. But there's a whole other thing that's going on. There are billions of people on the planet that are witnessing anything and everything and launching rockets of desire. And there is a vibrational reality that you might call a future experience that isn't future tense, it's present tense, that is right here, right now, from which you can derive satisfaction, but not while you're pushing against any of that. And so future governments, future experiences, future everythings are coming from this vortex, which could not exist without all of that. And so if there is this profound appreciation from anyone about anyone and everyone who is contributing to the vortex, not taking aside and not pushing against any of it, but just recognizing that powerful minds coming together and asking for what they want. Can you imagine if all of them were asking, with all of the experience in life and in government and in humanity that they have witnessed, the collective intelligence and experience of all of those people? Let's just talk singularly about the politicians for a moment, and let's acknowledge what they're asking for, and then take away their battle and just look at their ask, and then just be one who doesn't battle anymore, who just blisses out in travel, and who receives blocks of thought. We're not asking you to receive a block of thought and write a book and save the world, because the world doesn't need to be saved. We're just saying to you that there is satisfaction beyond your ability right now to even discern it or absorb it or acknowledge it, that is there for you to receive as a result of all this stuff that you think you want to travel away from so that you don't have to experience.
This has all been new to me because I haven't seen a television for 4 months.
Yeah.
And so it's like reintegrating from that feeling of lightness, joy, ease, and flow of travel, where I knew I'm in alignment and things that aren't supposed to happen.
So you just answered the question of our friend earlier who was talking about being born into physical experience. Here you are now addressing things that don't feel good while you address them. And the answer to her question, what to do next, just turn your attention back toward what feels better. But why would you not do that? Can you speak to the practical nature of humans and why? In other words, do you have to travel to withdraw your attention? First, let us ask you a series of questions. Do you mind?
Okay, no, sure.
Do you want to withdraw your attention from the discomfort of what you're seeing that you haven't been seeing for a few months?
Yeah, I would prefer to not have the effect of seeing that.
All right,
the joy, the
perfect
lightness,
answer.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't want to withdraw my attention. I actually am sort of called to give it my attention, but I would like to have a better response to it, which means you want to be in step 5, not in step 1. You want to be acknowledging the value of the contrast, listening for some nuggets that might be of benefit, and seeing it through the eyes of source. That's what we mean by getting out ahead of it. You got to get out ahead of it before you can see it through the eyes of Source. So here's the question. Can you be in your body? Yes. Can you be back in this nation with all of this information coming to you, not at you, but to you? Can you be there and be in alignment with the Source whom you were in alignment with when you were living different circumstances? In other words, do the circumstances have to be perfect for you to be in alignment, or can your desire for alignment cause it?
No, I think that's my question, is I know that I can be in that energy, and right now it's like, okay, how do I...
All right, so what got you in that energy? You were out ahead of it. What got you in that energy? You didn't start out in a hole that you're trying to climb yourself out of. So many people dig a big hole and crawl in it and then want a reward or recognition or a statue when they crawl out. But if you don't get in the hole, you're going to feel better, and there's a better chance of rising to the fullness of who you really are.
So is staying out of the hole related for me to daydreaming and being clear on the desires? Because it feels like accidentally the conditions have taken...
What it is, it's related to how much momentum you get going before you approach the hole. If you're tuned in, tapped in, turned on, and you've been basking, that's the reason that trip seems so appealing to you. And you get yourself all tuned in, you are more reluctant to even approach the hole and not very likely to fall into it because you're out ahead of it. Doesn't that make sense?
That's exactly what it feels like.
So this is our remedy.
Okay. More chocolate.
For sure.
Okay.
More daydreaming for the pleasure of the daydream, which means more tuning to Source energy. What we really want to emphasize, and it seems a little odd that we even have to explain it, and yet we understand why we do. Connection to Source and the momentum of that is like an atomic bomb in comparison to the biggest energy on the other side, which is like a firecracker. Really, when you get tilted this way, when you start daydreaming this way, when you get out ahead of it, when you're doing more of that, the momentum of that, this is why we were making the comparison of your world spinning in its orbit. As brilliant as humanity is, you have not managed to scrape enough dirt together to launch another planet into orbit. There is a power in that consciousness that you have constant access to. Think about the details of a daydream or the premise of a daydream. So, first of all, you're dreaming it, and stay with us that it came up out of your vortex. And because it came out of your vortex, which is where your inner being is, where Source energy is, the dream has no resistance in it when you first receive it. Now, you can dream it into resistance. You can try to break the limb off the golden tree. You can introduce resistance to it. But if you don't, then you allow the power of that to inspire you to more and more and more and more. So we're wanting to find ways to explain to you the comparative or relative difference between being under the influence of Source energy and being under the influence of the stream of consciousness that man has been offering. We're doing a sales job here to make it feel productive to you, to want to align with that. But in the same moment of trying to entice you into that kind of productivity, we defeat our own purpose in the sense, because then it sounds like we're trying to make productivity and winning the name of the game, and that isn't what it is at all. It's coming into your own power where you can feel the fullness of who you are.
You know, that's the closest feeling I have to that is traveling with the belief that everything is always working out for me.
And it is.
And having unimaginable things show up out of nothing to help me on my way.
And is that analogous to things in the vortex that you can't identify, that once they come together, you recognize it as your creation, but you couldn't have put it together in your own mind, so you couldn't have thought it into place, but you could receive it into place. This is the piece, isn't it?
It is. And so the intention coming back here is knowing that I can live in that sense of alignment regardless of what's going on conditionally around me.
And we think a very quick route to that would be to just ask yourself often, as it's unfolding and you're wondering about one thing or another, just stop for a moment and ask yourself, am I thinking a thought or am I receiving a thought?